Hey everybody, it's Nick here again for Grayscale Gorilla. I am the Gorilla, and today we're here for part 2 of the Destruction and Shatter tutorial that I put up yesterday. The second part today is going to be all about texturing and lighting the scene, getting it ready for a final render. We're going to talk a little bit about HDR lighting. We're going to talk about the sky environment and a new way to render HDR that I've been playing with that is really nice and it works really well for stuff like this. So let's get into it. Let's texture it. Let's light it. Let's just do this thing. Head on into Cinema. This is pretty much where we left. This is actually where we left off. I saved it and now we're back. We have our ball coming in, shattering. If you haven't watched the last tutorial, watch it, get to here, and let's move forward. First thing we're going to do is let's see, let's light the scene first and then we'll texture. So because the lights will affect how we texture things so much, it's often a good idea to start to light a scene and then texture it so you can see what your textures look like in the lighting. There's always some back and forth between the two, but let's just start with the lights. So I'm going to add a new material. I'm going to double click on it, and in the luminance channel I'm going to add a new texture. Now I'm going to add this HDR map I made with, let me see, it asks you if you want this image in the document search path. This just means that if you want it local to the project, you could say yes, but if you want to just leave it where it is, you could say no. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to say no. So this is an HDRI image that I built using what will be our new product that will be out probably within a month. Pretty soon. Look for it. It's called the we haven't quite named it yet, but it's a lighting rig package for Cinema 4D. It allows you to make really nice HDRI and lighting rigs for your scene, for tabletop stuff, similar to what we're doing, some MoGraph stuff. And it really allows you to set up lights in a really cool way, adjust their colors and their textures and their temperatures, and really make a really sexy studio lighting setup. So look for that soon. This is a test render. While we're building it, I kind of kicked this thing out and I thought it looked pretty good, so we're going to use that. And you could use any HDRI that you have sitting around. It's going to look a little bit different, but that's okay. The next thing you want to add is a sky image, or a sky object right here. If you go to the light, bam, right there, sky image or sky object, and you drop the texture on top of it, and you can see now what we have is what's in this HDR are a bunch of studio lights. If you ever lit anything in a studio, you'll know that there are basically a setup of lights around an object. We have two hard lights in the back here. There's a hard light, you can see one there, and a hard light here, and two big soft boxes in the front, just so you could see kind of what is kind of going on in the front. And in this, I'll talk a little bit more about lighting in a later tutorial, but let's just get in and start to light this guy. So that's it. We have the sky, we have the texture on it. What we need to do now is go into our render settings and add global illumination. Now, global illumination can get pretty hairy sometimes. Why am I blind to it here? Oh, it's already set up. Haha. I already set it up there. Let me just do that again. You go to Effect, Global Illumination, bam. Now, there are a ton of settings in global illumination. We're going to ignore a lot of them right now. I'll get into them later down the road in another tutorial. In fact, I have other ones that get into some of this, but for now, we're going to use this sky sampler. Now, I've recently got into this, something my buddy Rob was telling me about, and it works really well for scenes like this. If you have an HDRI image on your sky, you could use this sky sampler as a way to light your scene really simply, really pretty quickly. I'm going to change the gamma to 1.8 because that's the gamma that Macs run on, unless you're using Snow Leopard, which I think is now 2.2. But keep in mind, you do need to render out to the gamma that your monitor supports. It'll make things a lot more realistic. And then the only other option for the sky illumination is in this sky tab. It just says samples, and this just, let's just do the default and I'll show you what happens. Let's go to a part of the scene here where there's something to look at. There we go. I'm going to click render and we're just going to watch it. Pretty quick render, and it looks pretty good. Now it's pretty noisy, and what that setting is, what that samples setting is as we turn that up, it's going to get less and less noisy. You can see it rendered pretty quickly for an HDRI render. If you've played enough around with HDRI, you know that it's can take a long time. And this sky sampler really does a good job. We could really crank these numbers up. I'm going to go to 200, and we're just going to see now. Once you click render, it does take a second to kind of calculate everything, but once it gets into it, does a pretty dang good job, I think, with all that geometry and stuff going on. I'm going to maybe move it up just a little bit more. Now, you may want to move yours up even further if you have the time, but during this tutorial, I'm just going to kind of get it to a median middle point. That looks pretty good to me. I could deal with that render time, and I hope you guys can too. Looks like about 7 seconds to render that little box. So we have our basic lighting. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. In our general tab, I'm just going to say 110% instead of 100. Your HDR may vary, but that should get us close. Now, let's texture the little ball here. I'm going to go to New Material and open that up. And then this ball, I kind of imagine it like a cue ball, really white, maybe even like an off-white. So I'm just going to pull a little bit of blue out of it, so it's kind of an off, dirty white. Yeah, that looks good. And then we're going to add some reflection, kind of like a, cue ball has some pretty good reflection on it. Let me use a Fresnel shader in the texture to give it this quality of reflection where it reflects more on the edge than it does on the stuff facing you. And I'm going to turn the reflection way down and the Fresnel reflection way down. I have settings of 4% and 20%. Feel free to play around, but really with reflections, you don't need a lot. A lot of, especially if you're trying to make it look more real, things usually aren't really reflective. You want to keep your numbers low and go up from there. Now I'm just going to drag the material onto the sphere. I'm going to click render and just see how this thing looks. So now, not only is it picking up the reflections of our objects, it's also picking up reflections of our lights, which is pretty cool. And if I let this play out a little bit further here, you could render the ball kind of with less around it. Now you can see we have this softbox, and we actually have my lighting rig is reversed. These two hot lights, these two rim lights, are supposed to be in the back. So I could actually grab my sky texture and just rotate it. And I'm going to look up and see that, yep, our little dots, see those dots up there? Those are the rim lights. Again, I built this with our lighting rig. We could add these lights, and they're photoreal lights and stuff like that. I'll explain more about that later. But for now, let's see what we got. Click render. That looks better. We have our rim lights, we have our soft boxes, everything's looking nice. Now let's put a texture on here. There isn't much difference between what we have and what we need. This fracture object, let's just back up and let's just see it on its own before it gets busted. It looks pretty good right now. It kind of has this cement feel to it. So what we'll do is we'll add a new material, and we'll just make like kind of a dark charcoal cement material. Whoops, in the color channel, I'm going to kind of darken it up to this kind of gray, dark gray color. And then in the reflection, I am going to add reflection, but I'm going to make it a little bit blurry, maybe 20%. And I'm going to use the Fresnel shader again to do a similar thing with the reflections. And what this is going to do is this will have a reflection kind of material on it, and it'll reflect the scene around it, but it won't be sharp. It'll be kind of blurry, and it'll look like it's on stone or cement more than it will a really shiny object. Oh, so nothing happened because we didn't add our texture to our object. So go ahead and add the texture to either the fracture object or the cube. I don't think it matters at this point. But here we go. So let's get it to a point where it's a little bit busted up. Let's frame our scene and hit render and see what we have. Now, the reflective material will take a little bit longer to render. You see we're getting some pretty cool artifacts. It actually hits some of the lights. You can see the rim light reflecting in our material. Kind of cool there. That's not so bad. Let me let this play out. And it's a good idea to check your render in different sections of the scene just to see kind of what it looks like. Now we may get some weird artifacts with these, with the way this is blurring. So I may turn the blurring down just a little bit, maybe to 15. And the minimum samples, I'm just going to turn that up a little and turn down my overall reflection. And this is where you start to tweak and start to just see what it looks like in different ways. It's really hard to have a default material. Different lights and different settings will produce really, really different results. That may work. Let's see what this looks like when it's not busted up. It's just a cube. Not bad. Okay, so, and at the last minute, you know, you could just try something crazy. Like, what if it's kind of an orange material instead of a gray one? You know, love my orange. So you could just change the color of the object and see what that looks like. And this is kind of cool because it has more of a plasticky look to it. And I may keep that. That is pretty cool. Well, so it looks like I'm about ready to render. Let's find a cool camera angle. Now, we could add a camera if we wanted to, just to lock down the angle. But since we want to try a couple different ones, you know, maybe I'll just keep the default camera. And I think that might be it. So let's set this puppy up for render. If we go to our render settings, make sure your anti-aliasing is turned up. It's rare with reflections that you want your anti-aliasing to be geometry. I always turn it up to best and at least to 2.2. If you keep it on 4.4, it may take a little bit longer to render, but 2.2 is pretty good. Then what you can do is you can go to your output and choose your resolution for your render. In this case, I want it to be 16 by 9, and I'm going to lock the ratio 16 by 9, and I'm going to make it 600 pixels wide. I'm doing that because that's the width of my blog, and I'm going to render this out for you guys. And the last thing you want to do is say all frames, not just the current frame. You want to render all the frames, and that's it. You're good to go. So the last thing you need to do is pick where you want it to save, and you have to open this up. Actually, I need to slide it over since my thing is my box is a little small here. And then I'm just gonna name this Shatter Test 1. I'm gonna name it the same thing, and I'm gonna make a QuickTime movie out of it. If you're rendering longer stuff, I'd recommend to do TIFFs. So just in case your render crashes, but in this case, I'm going to do a QuickTime movie. Don't need Alpha Channel or anything for this one. Looks like I'm all set to go just for this basic render, just to kick it out for you guys. If you want to do compositing and stuff with it later or play around, you need to check a few more boxes to get the After Effects project. View one of my tutorials that has the After Effects to Cinema stuff going on to learn a little bit more about that. But I think for right now, this is looking pretty good. Maybe I'll pull out to see more detail. All right, that's looking good. So, so that's it. I'm gonna render this thing out. I'll post it with the render times and all that stuff for you guys, and it'll should be here below. So as soon as I'm off the camera here, I'm gonna render that, put this puppy online, and as always, if you have any questions, let me know. Drop a comment in, and look for more information about the lighting rig. We're going to have some more stuff coming up, some more tutorials based on it, and it'll be our next product. It's going to be basically a lighting rig kit, and it's going to have soft boxes, Kino flows, hot lights, soft lights, skylights, a whole bunch of different lighting setups that you can use to light your stuff. And with all these really cool MoGraph 2 glossy kind of animations showing up everywhere, I think there should be a really easy way for people to light their scene really, really sexy, and hopefully that's where our product will come in. So stay tuned for that. There's also going to be a lot of training that comes with it that's going to show you how to light your scene and do more stuff like this. So keep an eye out. I'm really pumped about it. Should be out soon. And anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in another tutorial. Bye, everybody.